Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. Today's date is Wednesday, February 26th. This is the A block, which means we started right at the top of the hour. My co-host, my esteemed co-host, John Combest. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Brad.
Every single day, John labors over a hot keyboard. Every single morning he does this. He puts together this entire list of all these important stories that you should know about in the state of Missouri, government-wise, news-wise, sometimes goofy stuff, occasionally goofy stuff. Sometimes the real serious stuff turns into goofy stuff. You know how that is. Anyway, puts together this list every single day, johncombest.com, C-O-M-B-E-S-T, johncombest.com. But what we do is he takes the articles, everything he's got in there, and he distills it down to the top three. I have no idea what he's going to do. Occasionally I guessed it. What was that? Monday I guessed it? When I guessed, was it yesterday?
Yeah, you did 2 days ago. You guessed one of the issues, Brad.
I guessed the number one issue. But that doesn't happen anymore because very often because John's a smart guy and I'm just a dumb radio guy that's been around transmitters too many times, and my brain cells are sort of fried. Not fried like my other cohorts in radio business who got fried with chemicals and smoke and stuff like that, but mine have been fried by radiation. Anyway, we start the show off with this guy right here. What's your name, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And we start with?
In third place.
Story that originates right here in the Westplex, Brad. A state representative from Wentzville named Tricia Byrnes. She's had some experience with a nationwide hotline that's also here in Missouri. Brad, you've heard of the 988 suicide and crisis lifeline, right? You've heard of these 988 lines.
Yeah,
right?
that's the new suicide and mental health line.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a nationwide thing that states have also implemented. And it's kind of, Brad, yesterday you talked about, excuse me, sort of like a systemization of nationwide stuff. You were talking about BOCA, but in this case, it's taking national best practices and putting them together in one place. So folks can call or text the 988 suicide and crisis line if they're personally going through a crisis or if they know someone who's going through a crisis. And apparently Mrs. Byrnes knew someone who was going through an issue, but she noticed something strange when she texted the text line. Instead of dealing with a human being, she got a number of what appeared to be just screening questions. So this would seem like something maybe if you were calling on the phone, Brad, and you got a number of press 1 if this, press 2 if this. And what Representative Byrnes points out is the text conversation that she tried, and she tried again recently just to test out the system. There was nobody that asked her right away, hey, are you okay? Are you safe? Is anyone with you in danger of being harmed? Representative Byrnes points out that even if you call AAA, the first question they ask you if you're roadside is, are you safe? Is anyone injured? Are you okay? So Representative Byrnes calls this a catastrophic error that we can fix. And what she wants to do is she wants to make sure that in that first line of defense, so to speak, when folks contact the text line, the 988 text line, they're actually dealing with a real life human being. Now, for their part, the Missouri Department of Mental Health says they did not testify on Representative Byrnes' bill, but they said they're working with the nationwide group to address concerns. So my guess here, Brad, reading between the lines, is that Representative Byrnes probably isn't the first one to point out that there's this issue, that there's some challenges with this, and that the nationwide group is probably looking at, hey, how do we make sure we have real life people around instead of just a generic screening thing? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and what's sad about this is emblematic of so many things we do nowadays. I mean, obviously, you would think that something should be elevated to the point where if it's a suicide prevention line, that there should be a live body on the other end of it. But, you know, how many times during the day, like when I make phone calls, I've got an instance right now, a company I'm trying to contact, that there's no way you contact them on the phone. Because if you know, they dial 6 for this, when you dial 6 for that, they give you an email address. You know, it's like, Okay,
Yeah.
email. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, if I want to email you, I'll email you. But it's interesting. You talk about AAA. Do you know the line that 911 operators use when you dial? And you wouldn't know this because you never dial 911. But you know what they always ask you?
No.
Where is your emergency? That's the first.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because what they want to do is they want to immediately get a location so that they can start rolling the fire or the ambulance or the police to your location, and then they will ask you, okay, what's exactly going on? Which I think is interesting because that's not the way it used to be. They used to say, what's your emergency? Now they say, where's your emergency?
But, yeah, that makes sense to get it. And I bet they're helped by a lot of other tools like geolocation, things like that. Not to be confused with the Westplex geofence signal. So I should point out, too, that this Missouri Net story is brought to us by Elisa Nelson of Missouri Net. So we'll see. I can see this being something that has progress throughout the year because it seems like a common sense fix. The pushback will clearly be, okay, who's going to pay for it? And where do we find these workers? Because that seems to always be the pushback.
Well, yeah, it's to the point where how do you, and here's you brought up an interesting thing. Are these calls, even though this is a national system, are these calls being answered locally in Missouri? Is this like a subset?
No, I don't know the answer to that, Brad.
And now here's another question. And you know what? You and I are going to have something very interesting. How do you know what they say to you when you call AAA?
How do I know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Why is that the opening to a knock knock joke?
No, you said in your little dissertation there, you said when you call AAA, they always say, and what did you say?
Are you okay?
Okay. How do you know they do that?
Because I'm a member of AAA.
John, I have never in my life called AAA.
Oh my God, what do you mean? You see people by the side of the road and you don't annoy other people by calling so you get a pat on the head? What's wrong with you, Brad?
I have never called.
Hey, you should call your cheapskate company that'll leave me by the side of 141 for an hour and 20 minutes while I have a child with me, Brad.
I have never.
Cheapskate towing.
I have never called AAA in my life. Never, John, because unlike
because
you.
You're too cheap to join AAA?
I can't afford it.
Yeah, I would assume so.
I can't afford it because
I'm meeting with my accountant. We're talking about all the time I'm donating to the radio stations. I can imagine you don't join AAA, Brad.
Well, mainly because of the fact that usually I end up fixing it myself, or to the point where, like I have, like in my car, my son's always amazed at this. In my car that I drive most of the time, I have a floor jack, I have an impact wrench, I have all sorts of tools in my car, and to the point where, and unfortunately, this sometimes backfires on me because about 3 weeks ago, my son called me on a Friday evening, he's driving home from work, he had a problem with his car, and I go, okay, I'll be right over. So I went over and took his wheel off and fixed it for him, and got him back on the road. So I'm the AAA guy. You
are the AAA guy, Brad.
What's interesting is I tell my kids that when they dial Brad 911, which is my number that I bought, which you can dial me direct. Brad 911. When you dial Brad 911, I always ask him, which one of these is which one of this kid's is mine, and where are you stuck? And then they go, Dad, I'm stuck here on 141. Okay, I'll be right over. See, now I could be just your service, John. I could get you into the family, so to speak, and you, instead of calling AAA and giving it impersonal, you could get me and I'd come to your aid. How's that?
That sounds great. I think I'll stick with AAA. Now, Brad, you're not only good at changing tires, but you were on the cutting edge of TikTok evolution, which leads us into story number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
KBIA Radio in Colombia touches on a story that we haven't talked about in a while, which is the TikTok ban. President Trump paused the TikTok ban, at least until April. And the future is unclear of what's going to happen with it. KBIA reached out to some folks that make some money on TikTok, that get a little advertising revenue, that get a little bit of kickback from TikTok on their views. The headline is, Missouri content creators adjust to TikTok's uncertain future. Now, I usually don't include crazy, weird stories that don't have to do with politics, but this does have to do with federal policy in the state of Missouri. I thought it was unique that this reporter found a content creator who recently moved to New Orleans, but he built his TikTok business in Kansas City. And this reporter, by the way, reached out to some folks that do improv comedy, do stand-up comedy. There's a gentleman named Connor Clary And this reporter doesn't make it clear exactly what this gentleman's content is, but he says that the amount that he earns on TikTok varies. Some months he makes only $500. Other months he nets around $6,000 a month. So if you're one of these content creators and this stream could go away, you're pretty worried. We include in here, or I should say the reporter includes in here, the traditional advice, which is you never want to rely on just one platform in case you get deplatformed. Or in the case of TikTok, in case the platform goes away. So some of these so-called digital consultants are reminding people, don't put all your eggs in the TikTok basket. Do a little Instagram, do a little YouTube, because you never know what's going to happen. So the highlight of this story are the folks that this reporter highlighted in Colombia, the gentleman who does stand-up. But I thought it was pretty cool, Brad, a reminder that some people do make a real-life living on social media.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because of the fact that Armstrong and Getty addressed this yesterday. And if you want to pick this up in the B block, it's sort of an interesting story they went into where people don't realize how much work social media could be, which I talk about all the time. You know, I mean, when I'm trying to sell advertising on this radio station or other stations, people go, well, I can do social media for free. And I go, okay, what's your time worth? You know, because John, you and I both know you do a great deal of it as well, too. It's not the kind of thing you snap your fingers in 2 minutes, it's done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think usually when I clean up the stuff that's posted to YouTube, just redoing the red circle labels and YouTube and doing the things that I do for every show takes about a full hour because I've timed it before. So with no distractions, it takes about an hour.
See,
and so you're right. It's not free.
What John's referring to is the workflow that I do all the editing to the show and put it up on our YouTube platform, or actually it goes on our podcast platform, Red Circle, and then it automatically transfers over to YouTube. And John doesn't like anything I do, and he changes everything to the point where some mornings I'm going to, you know, me, I do that this morning. I'm just going to put goofy stuff. I'm just going to write goofy stuff. And then John will say,
that's what you do, right? And Brad, you do, by the way, you do a great job with the labels. There's also a brand new thing that's only been around for 30 or something years called search engine optimization. So when a headline reads, Brad talks about the thing that's goofy and then the other thing, and then they have a laugh, probably not many people are going to find that on Google searching for Brad says the funny thing and they talk about the other thing, and then there's Joe Mattis spelled wrong. No, so maybe we'll clean it up a little bit and make it, instead of taking something that's completely low effort, we'll put a little effort in, and maybe people will be able to find the show.
God, I feel so good. John's just said what I do is low.
And maybe A Block will be up today before 10 p.m.
Low effort. Okay. Thanks, John. You always make me feel so good. Okay.
Thank you. You're welcome, Brad.
And by the way, are we married?
We are, Brad.
My husband, he doesn't do anything right. He's low effort everything.
I am quite the nag, Brad. When it comes to execution, I am quite the nag, and I should be more grateful. But then again, I've never called 91 Brad and had you come change my tire.
No, it's Brad 911. Okay.
Oh, Brad 911. My apologies.
Okay. Last but not least,
The number one.
I bring you a story from Kansas City, and it's not a news story. It's an opinion piece in the Kansas City Star. It's by a woman named Andrea Bach-Hunz, K-U-N-Z, Andrea Bach-Hunz, and she's an ophthalmologist, and she used to live in Kansas, it appears, or worked in Kansas, and now she's semi-retired, and she lives in Platte City, Missouri. The headline is, I'm a white Christian Missourian. Jesus wouldn't approve of Mike Kehoe's DEI plan. She goes on to tell the story that she was raised in a Christian household with a lot of white privilege. She ended up having kids. She ended up having a son. And her son was rejected from his first choice college. She describes her son as being a, quote, overachieving, straight, white, cisgender. And, you know, cisgender is the slur for saying if you're born male, then you conform to male standards, or you're born female, you conform to female standards. She has this overachieving, straight, white, cisgender son, and he was rejected from his college of choice in favor of other candidates who had lower test scores and who were not white. And she admits that she was angered by that. But she admits, or she goes on to profess, that nearly a decade later, she has grown so much that she accepts the fact that her son should have gotten rejected. Her son had all this white privilege, and his life ended up being just fine. He went to his second choice school, and now he's even in graduate school. He's just fine. That opportunity went to a minority, and that's the way it should be in America. You say, John, that seems like kind of a crazy story, but there's a lot of crazy old white liberals running around, right? It gets better. Mike Kehoe signed the DEI bill, the bill that would eliminate DEI discrimination. And this woman noticed something. Andrea noticed that he has a painting of the Virgin Mary in his office. I'll read Andrea's direct quote. As a Christian, I am particularly offended by the prominent display of a cross and a painting of the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Christ, on Kehoe's desk. Brad, Jesus would be an ardent supporter of DEI. I can't even say the sentence. It's so ridiculous. Jesus would support DEI, and Jesus would be particularly upset with Mike Kehoe for signing a DEI bill. So if you're in the mood for some tremendous white guilt and mental gymnastics from a woman who's clearly not proud to be white, go check out the Kansas City Star today. It's near the op-ed section, near the bottom with the opinion pieces on my website today.
You know, interesting you should bring this up because Annie Fry started off her show yesterday with, and you know what? I'm terrible at this. I should have written this down. I'm driving, so I don't drive and write at the same time. But she started off with a guy who's a catcher, major league. I think he's still actually.
Lucroy, yeah. Jonathan Lucroy played for the Brewers.
So did you hear? Do you know who I'm talking about then?
No, I read the transcript. Or I saw the transcript this morning. I didn't link to it because it's not about Missouri politics, but I saw that she had him on. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, and it was interesting because he said that sports is the ultimate meritocracy. And he says there is no DEI in sports. It's the ultimate meritocracy. And that's exactly what I say all the time. You know, and he talked about the fact that hold on a minute. He talked about the fact that even though it was a meritocracy, it's obviously very diverse. He talked about the fact that there was a guy on his team who was a Cuban. And I mean, this was interesting. He talked about the fact that one day, I think he was the guy who was the Cuban or some maybe it was from Central America. And he said to John, he says, why are there Americans that don't love this country? Why are there Americans that can complain about things and want to burn the flag and things like that? He says, my relatives are back home eating squirrels, eating cats and eating dogs. And here, even if you are a very low-income person in the United States, you get a good life, much better than some of the good people in my home country. And he says, I don't know why that is. And it was sort of interesting.
Yeah.
But
yeah, the arrogance, the American arrogance of entitlement.
Well, yeah.
And actually, what the guy from Cuba said was, he said, they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. He did a little dance, too. What I love about Annie having him on was I hated Jonathan Lucroy when he was with the Brewers, because we had quite a rivalry with the Brewers around like 2010, 2011. And I hated Lucroy. I didn't like him when he was with the Reds. And to see, when I saw that he was on Annie's show, I'm like, holy cow. And wasn't one of his points, I saw the headline was like, he refused to bow or take a knee, right?
Yes. And but see, the interesting thing was, it's what I say all the time. If you are a sports fan, you are cheering for the ultimate against DEI. You're cheering for the exact opposite of DEI. You're cheering for the best. And what I talk about all the time, and I've made this comment before, what always drives me nuts is you hear these guys on sports talk radio and ESPN 101 back in the day, K-fans, and they would say, well, you know, I'm a Union guy and I listen to the games all the time. And that guy who's on the Cardinals second base, he's only batting a 152 and we should get rid of that guy. You know, and yet if you turn that around when you said, okay, you guys are in the Carpenters Union, and there's one guy on your crew, let's say your framing crew doing houses, one guy in your framing crew who shows up hungover every morning and has to, you know, sit in his car for 20 minutes every half an hour to gain consciousness again. I mean, don't you get rid of that guy? Oh, no, we can't. He's in the union. He's one of us. You know what I'm saying? It's to the point where
the union protection. That's like hypocrisy.
It's like the ultimate hypocrisy. You know, yet this guy wants to get this guy kicked off the Cardinals because he's only batting a $150. You know what I'm saying? Well,
I do know exactly what you mean. And thanks to DEI, Brad, you once again are going to be the starting shortstop for the Cardinals on opening day. because they do not have any one-eyed cripples in the lineup.
To this day, when people say to me, oh, what do you really want to do in life? And I say, pitch for the Cardinals. And they go, you're an old guy who limps and has blind in one eye. I go, yeah. And a lot of times, if I'm with somebody who I sort of know, but then I'll go, well, that's what DEI is all about. I should be able to pitch for the Cardinals, because of the fact that how many blind, guys in their 80s with one bad eye and a bad hip are pitching for the Cardinals? How many? The answer is 0.
No, but you know what, Brad? You can still play pickleball, and this is your advertisement. This is your live read for the new pickleball facility.
Just like when I got rejected at St. Louis University Law School, and I told you that, didn't I? Tell you that story?
Yeah, you took the LSAT, didn't you?
Oh, twice. But then when I got rejected at St. Louis University Law School, a week later, I heard the dean of admissions, who rejected me, on NPR talking about how they're so working so hard and having a diverse, class of students for St. Louis University Law. And I thought to myself, yeah, I'm an old white guy. How many old white guys are in the St. Louis University School of Law? 0. You know what I'm saying?
That's true, Brad. That's true.
Okay, we have to take a break. John's been talking way too much, and he's been complimenting me on my excellent skills of putting stuff up on the internet.